originates with a conception in the mind of an agent and ends with its realization in the material. Let's go from there to there. The work rather carries on throughout its performances, none of which is the work, but all of which contribute to its never-ending generation. And in this regard, calligraphy has much in common, I think, with the performance of instrumental music. I'm a practicing cellist, and I've played, like most cellists, I've played the same movements from Bach's set of suites for unaccompanied cello again and again and again. But this is not like running off identical copies from a template, whether engraved in memory or on the score. It's not an iteration, it is an itineration. Because in my consciousness and my experience, the music lives on as an ever-flowing current. Each time I begin to play, I'm launched once more into the current, through which I have to feel my way, rather as a boatman feels the stream, with no assurance whatever of how things are going to turn out. And it is at every moment a risky endeavour. Though one might recover from errors, it's impossible to go back and correct them. So I am, when I play, an itinerant, a wayfarer, and like all wayfarers, I have to improvise. And nor is the performance any less improvisatory to the extent to which it is scripted or scored. And to the contrary, I think you could argue that the more strictly a performance is specified, the greater the improvisational demands placed on practitioners to get it right. I think you could actually transfer that same argument to the kitchen and say that the more detailed the recipe, the more precise it is, the greater the improvisational demands of the cook in the kitchen. Because any formal resemblance between the copy and the model is not given in advance, but is rather a horizon of attainment to be judged in retrospect. And that's why there's creativity even and especially in the maintenance of an established tradition. The music psychologist Nicholas Cook has shown that a classical musician who plays from a score improvises just as much as a jazz musician who does not. The difference lies in not in how much they improvise, but in their aims. You might say that the classical musician is centripetal, aiming for the bull's eye, whereas the jazz musician is centrifugal, seeking to cast the net wide. But the same variation from centripetal to centrifugal can be discerned in many other fields of performance, such as in calligraphy, in dance, and in athletics. And in athletics, for example, compare archery with shot put. Both involve a great deal of improvisation, but the archer is trying to hit the bullseye, the shot putter is trying to hurl that shot just as far away from the body as it possibly can. And in dance, a wonderful example comes from the work of Felicia Hughes Freeland on Javanese dance, which is one of the most precisely specified genres of dance you can find anywhere in the world. And the steps are absolutely precisely specified, and yet the dancer has to make the dance flow. And there's nothing in the specifications that tell you how to do that. To do that requires a great deal of practice and a great deal of improvisation. Then another interesting area where I think that this kind of improvisation goes on is in handwriting, where we work out how to join the letters in the cursory script. Again, we're taught what the letters are supposed to look like, but and at school we're given some instructions about how you're supposed to join them up. But as it turns out, everybody joins up letters in different sorts of ways and improvises their own particular ways of doing it. So, in the performing arts, as in any craft, novices learn through repetitive practice in copying models shown to them. But to copy, as in the case of calligraphy or in music practice or whatever, is not to replicate a pre-existing form, but to align observations of the model with action in a world that is itself suspended in movement. And fluent performance then has a rhythmic quality to it. But this quality of rhythm does not lie in the repetitiveness of the movement itself. If you've got a mechanically repetitive movement on its own, you don't have anything rhythmic. For there to be rhythm, the movement has to be felt. And the practitioner who has a feel for what he or she is doing is one who can bring the many concurrent movements with which he must engage more or less into phase with one another. And that calls for continual correction in response to an ongoing perceptual monitoring of the task as it unfolds. I'm drawing here on Henri Lefebvre's work on rhythm analysis, a posthumously published and incomplete work. But in that, he argues that rhythmicity implies not just repetition, but differences within repetition. Feeling then lies in the coordination of movement and perception that is of the essence of skilled practice. So that you're repeating a movement in relation to other movements that are going on, but in a way in which your own movement has to be continually responsive to the fluctuations that are going on around you in a number of other different movements that are relevant to the task. So, and the essence of skill then lies in that ability to couple action and perception that makes rhythmic movement, as opposed to metronomic movement, possible. So by way of perception, the practitioner's own rhythmic gestures are attuned to the multiple rhythms of the environment. And so any task which is itself a movement takes place within a network of movements. I got that phrase from that great work by André Lerard-Gourand, Le Geste et la Parole, the gesture and speech, where he says that every movement takes place within a network of movements within which the existence of every practitioner is suspended. And the measure of their skill lies in the sensibility that enables practitioners to respond to environmental perturbations that would throw the performance off course were it confined to the execution of a fixed motor program. So the point is that if skill simply lay in the ability to repeat a particular movement mechanically, maybe quickly, effectively, maybe efficiently with less muscle power, if skill merely lay in that, then the slightest perturbation, the slightest thing that would take it off course, and you wouldn't be able to correct it. You'd be offline. Suppose one example I've written about is sawing through a plank of wood. Suppose you're sawing through a plank of wood, you've drawn a line which you're following with the saw, but if you're just sawing away like that, and if for some reason it just went slightly offline, you just carry on and you wouldn't be able to correct it. But the skilled carpenter can continually adjust the direction of the saw so that he's able to follow the line, and that requires that kind of continual monitoring. And so the essence of skill lies not in the ability to reproduce a fixed motor action of quickly and efficiently, but always to adjust the action in response to a perceptual monitoring of the task. So the skilled practitioner is improvising a path through a field of practices rather than mechanically executing the rules and representations of transmitted culture. And in doing so, he or she is not imposing pre-existent forms on inert matter, but in a sense intervening in the fields of force and currents of material in which forms are generated. So you're not imposing a pre-existing design on matter, but inserting yourself into a set of flows and materials. And in this sense, practitioners are wayfarers or itinerants whose skill lies in their ability, if you will, to find the grain of the world's becoming and follow its course while bending it to their evolving purpose. I'm drawing actually a bit on a nice analogy that Deleuze and Guattari have in The Thousand Plateaus, and it's an analogy of simply chopping a log. You've got a log of wood and you're making firewood and you're splitting the log into bits. The wood itself has a grain, You have an idea about how you want to go. You bring your axe down, the axe enters the grain, and then